Play this piano, I'll marry you. Billionaire mocked Black Janitor until he played like Mozart. Don't touch that piano with your dirty hands. Like a razor, Victoria Sterling's voice sliced through the champagne talk. Daniel Hayes and the immaculate Steinway Grand were separated by the rich heiress. She pushed his cleaning cart away, her diamond bracelet glistening. The mop was still pouring as Daniel froze. 200 of the wealthiest in Manhattan turned to gaze. From his faded coveralls to his old work boots, Victoria's cold blue gaze swept over him. Do you believe a person like you should be close to something this valuable? She stabbed at the piano with her manicured finger. This instrument is more expensive than your whole family will ever be. Before continuing, I want to invite you to like the video and leave a comment from where you are watching this beautiful story. The throng echoed with nervous laughter. Daniel's mouth clenched. Then Victoria struck the fatal blow. I'll marry you right then and there if you play this piano. Cruel laughter erupted in the room. Have you ever been so degraded that they used you as a source of amusement, carrying Daniel Hayes and the burden of 3 jobs, 2 dreams, and 1 impossible decision that would define everything? The 4-person subway car rattled through the darkness toward Manhattan at 30 in the morning. His face, etched by premature responsibilities, gazed back from the dirty window. Daniel appeared to be a guy of 29, who had raised his sister, mourned his father, and seen his mother's kidneys fail 1 dialysis session at a time. However, his hands, which were resting on ancient work gloves, conveyed a different message. Long fingers, exact placement, chemically worn, yet graceful in their subdued power. I'll marry you if you can play this piano. As Brooklyn vanished behind him, the billionaire's words replayed in his head. He had spent 18 hours cleaning toilets, sweeping floors, and pretending that Victoria Sterling's vile laughter hadn't left a permanent mark on his chest like graffiti on a subway wall. Daniel's sister Maya texted him, and his phone buzzed. Again. Mum's session lasted a long time. The surgeon wants to discuss the procedure. They didn't have the $45,000 for the procedure. It could have easily been $45 million. The train squealed to a halt. Daniel picked up his battered rucksack and ascended to street level, where the sky was punctured by the towers of Manhattan like golden needles piercing clouds. He was scrubbing the Meridian Club foyer at 5:15 a.m., where Victoria Sterling's monthly membership fee was more than his yearly income. There was another universe in which the Meridian Club existed, Persian carpets that are more expensive than homes. Older than the Constitution are oil paintings. Members who measured time in quarterly reports and spoke in stock tickers. Daniel passed through this planet like an unseen ghost, essential but not recognized. For 7 years, he had been invisible. He was referred to as remarkable by his teachers at Howard University 7 years ago. The Manhattan School of Music full scholarship was awarded 7 years later. He had given up the scholarship on the day his father's scaffold fell in Queens, in the ICU. With construction dust still in his lungs, his father had said, "Son," Daniel had vowed that he would take care of them. 3 days after the burial, the scholarship letter had arrived. Daniel pushed his cart by the club's music room about 6 in the morning. Chopin's Ballade No was played on the Steinway grand piano, which sat like a sleeping giant behind beveled glass doors. The identical piece Victoria had made fun of him for was lying open on the music stand. Professors who had never seen anything like it gave him a standing ovation when he performed the same piece at his senior recital. Muscle memory stirred, causing his fingers to quiver uncontrollably. 4 years of theory, 4 years of technique, and 4 years of lecturers telling me that you communicate music, not just play it, Daniel. However, dialysis was not covered by spoken music. It did not cover rent in a studio apartment where Maya studied by lamplight after the overhead bulb blew out last month and his mother slept on a fold-out couch. Their current world was precisely 420 square feet in Bed-Stuy, where Daniel slept on an air mattress that deflated slightly every night and needed to be adjusted in the morning before work, where Maya's homework covered the kitchen table they had inherited from their grandmother, and where his mother's medical equipment took up the living room. Dreams were postponed, and the flat smelled like disinfectant. Because talking about tuition was like talking about colonizing Mars, Maya's acceptance letters from Columbia, NYU, and Barnard remained unopened on the counter, practically impossible, yet theoretically feasible. Their lone family portrait was displayed on the kitchen wall. Maya is beaming in her high school cap and gown, while Daniel is holding his parents at his Howard graduation, before everything became about surviving rather than living, before the scaffolding, before the diagnosis. Daniel, however, had found safety. Security guard Marcus Williams, a former jazz musician, would open practice room C for precisely 2 hours every Tuesday and Thursday night after the Lincoln Center cleaning crew had completed their formal rounds. 6 months prior, Marcus had observed Daniel humming while mopping and remarked, "Brother, these hands weren't made for mops." Daniel's sanity was preserved by those nocturnal sessions. He played Bach to Basie, Mozart to Monk, all by himself on a battered upright piano. His fingers recalled what his life had forgotten, that beauty transcended wealth and that quality existed outside of circumstances. He performed the same tune Victoria had used as ammunition, Chopin's Ballade No. 1, last Thursday. Daniel had done it perfectly, with every note being exact and every statement brimming with passion that had only grown stronger after 7 years of stillness. Marcus had been standing in the doorway, crying, when he was done. That was praying, Danny, not playing. However, prayers did not cover expenses. Surgery was not financed by prayers. The voice in Daniel's mind that told him he was wasting his life, one mop stroke at a time, was not silenced by prayers. Once more, his phone buzzed. Maya was accepted to Columbia on a full academic scholarship. However, they require a response about the music supplement by Friday. Requested that you simply record something. Daniel gave up mopping. Maya had submitted an application to Columbia's pre-med and music composition dual programs. She had inherited their family's talent for music as well as their father's scientific brains. However, a recording of an original work played by a talented pianist was necessary for the music supplement. Daniel had always been that particular pianist. However, recording meant being seen. Risk was involved in recording. Even though it was oppressive, recording required leaving the shadows where survival was certain. He considered what Victoria Sterling had said, "I'll marry you if you play this piano." Marriage had not been the problem. Power, putting him in his proper place, and reminding him that certain areas, like that Steinway, like prosperity, like dignity, weren't intended for individuals like him, had all been involved. Daniel started mopping again, but he was moving differently. Every stroke was controlled and purposeful, akin to keyboard finger workouts, because Daniel Hayes was starting to understand that invisibility wasn't protection somewhere between Maya's deadline and Victoria's nastiness. Between his father's final desire and his mother's hospital expenditures, it was a prison, perhaps, just possibly. It was time to make a splash. The grandfather's gold wristwatch, which was his last remaining inheritance from his father, was ticking away at 7 in the morning. The members would be there soon. Victoria Sterling will soon be gliding down these hallways, her vicious remarks resonating in the marble corridors as her diamond bracelet caught the light. Daniel will soon have to decide between becoming famous and remaining unseen. Victoria Sterling, stunning, terrible, and unavoidable, came to the Meridian Club like a storm system. 3 minutes before to her anticipated arrival at precisely 8:47 a.m., her Bentley Mulsanne purred to the curb. Victoria was already leaving as the valet hurried forward, her Louboutin heels tapping against marble like a metronome marking time for lesser mortals. Technically, her family trust owned the club, and she walked through the entrance hall as if she owned it. Near the door, near to Rockefeller and Vanderbilt, was a metal plaque bearing the sterling name, Old Money, the kind that was known to all and didn't need to be announced. Miss Sterling, good morning. The voice of the concierge held the customary respect for members whose monthly payments were higher than the majority of yearly salaries. Victoria remained silent. She didn't react to service personnel unless it was absolutely required. She didn't waste money on those who couldn't pay back the investment, since in her perspective, recognition was money. She floated toward the elevators, her platinum blonde hair catching the morning light coming through stained glass windows. She had planned every aspect of her look, the tennis bracelet with diamonds from 3 continents and the Chanel outfit that cost more than most cars. Despite not being married, she wore the 10-carat engagement ring since it symbolized power rather than matrimony. As she scrolled through pharmaceutical stock reports, her chief financial officer, James Morrison, followed behind her as usual. Her publicist, Rebecca Parker, documented every occasion for social media optimization, and her doctor, Whitman, the club's resident physician, verified her health objectives. Holding up her phone, Rebecca whispered, "Udi, the Wellness Gala is trending. Since yesterday, #SterlingCares has received 2.3 million impressions." Victoria had a grin as piercing as surgical steel. She would be positioned as a healthcare champion at tonight's charity dinner, despite Sterling Pharmaceuticals raising insulin costs by 340% the previous quarter. It was a profitable and tasty irony. They went inside the main ballroom of the club, where the function was to take place tonight. Workers were moving about like ants, changing the lighting and hanging banners. With predatory accuracy, Victoria's ice-blue eyes swept the room, noting any details that could need to be adjusted. Her eyes paused at the Steinway grand piano in the middle of the stage. "What's that there for?" The coldness of liquid nitrogen was in her voice. James looked at his tablet. Live classical music, according to the entertainment committee, would improve the atmosphere. Incredibly advanced. Sophisticated. Like wine she was about to spit out, Victoria rolled the word around her mouth. "Who's on stage?" James scrolled wildly. It isn't specific. I think it's ornamental." Like a general surveying the battlefield, Victoria walked up to the piano. It was a great instrument. The ebony surface of a $180,000 concert grand reflects the crystal lights in the ballroom. On the stand, sheet music for Chopin's ballade No. 1. She had been made to try the piece during her mandated piano lessons at the Dalton School as a child, and she knew what it was. After 6 months, she had given up, calling classical music unimportant and boring. Her teacher had tactfully hinted that she could be happier pursuing other interests. "Ma'am." Hesitantly, a maintenance man came over. "Shall we reschedule for tonight?" Like a laser aiming for its target, Victoria's gaze suddenly shifted to the man, Hispanic and older. He wore the same uniform as the other members of the invisible army that kept her world running smoothly. "Are you a pianist?" she inquired. Evidently uncertain if this was a trick question, the man blinked. "No, ma'am, you obviously don't." Victoria laughed, and it tinkled like shattered crystal. "It was foolish of me to inquire." She traced the edge of the piano with her manicured finger, making no marks on its flawless surface. But like a predator examining the migration patterns of its prey, her mind was busy calculating angles. 200 of Manhattan's most powerful individuals would attend tonight's event. As she positioned herself for the aggressive takeover of Meridian Therapeutics next quarter, senators, Pharmaceutical executives, European nobles, and tech titans came together to celebrate her generosity. Something noteworthy that would go viral beyond Rebecca's hashtags was needed for the evening. Something that would serve as a clear reminder of who was in charge in this room. Victoria's board chairman texted her, and her phone chimed. Keep up the trend, as sterling stock rises 3% on the gala hype. Grinning, she began planning the entertainment for evening. The piano would remain in its current location. "Rebecca," she called without looking back, "ensure that the camera is positioned around this piano in the best possible way. I think the gala tonight will be one to remember." Daniel Hayes wheeled his cleaning cart past the ballroom service door while Victoria carried on with her examination. He could see her standing next to the Steinway through the glass doors, her presence turning the room into a hybrid of a courtroom and a coliseum. She turned slightly as she saw his reflection on the piano's surface, and for precisely 2.3 seconds, those ice-blue eyes met his. Long enough for Victoria Sterling to conclude that tonight's entertainment had just appeared, long enough for recognition, long enough for calculation. Her teeth were as sharp and white as pharmaceutical-grade cocaine, and her smile grew wider. "I'll marry you if you can play this piano." She had practiced her remarks 12 hours prior. The performance would take place tonight. The ballroom of the Meridian Club had been turned into a royal stage. Marble flooring that have been flawlessly polished are illuminated by golden light from crystal chandeliers. Under oil paintings worth more than the GDP of a small nation, 200 of Manhattan's most influential people mixed together. Victoria Sterling, a vision in midnight blue Valentino that cost more than most yearly wages, held court at the ballroom center. Like planets circling a particularly deadly star, legislators and pharmaceutical executives vied for her attention. With a champagne flute lifted in salute, Dr. Whitman said, "The insulin accessibility program has been transformative. The leadership of Miss Sterling demonstrates that compassion and profit can coexist." Diamonds could have been cut by Victoria's smile. In addition to developing a compassionate care program that benefited precisely 0.3% of impacted patients, Sterling Pharmaceuticals increased the price of insulin. However, the focus tonight was on optics rather than mathematics. With practiced authority, she spoke out, "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice echoing throughout the ballroom. "Before we start the official program for tonight, I want to talk about something that has been bothering me." Phones came out of fancy purses, and conversations paused. It was newsworthy when Victoria Sterling tormented herself over anything. "I learned something really unsettling regarding our club's standards earlier today. Like a director getting an orchestra ready." Victoria's icy blue eyes swept the audience, creating tension. "Our service staff seems to think they know exquisite culture." The throng echoed with nervous laughter. "Here we go," Senator Morrison said to his wife. Daniel Hayes had been silently refilling water glasses at the service entrance when Victoria's remarks stopped him in his tracks. Victoria Sterling had other ideas, although he had planned to finish his nighttime tasks covertly, with a voice as sharp as a knife. She screamed out, "Daniel, would you please come?" 200 eyes swiveled in his direction. Despite his plain black suit, Daniel carried himself with dignity and advanced slowly, despite the physical pressure of their combined gaze. Victoria went on, her voice increasing dramatic force. "This morning, I found our custodial staff inspecting our precious Steinway grand piano. As if someone with his background could possibly understand such artistry. He studied it, not cleaned it. Mind you," appreciative murmurs came from the throng. Rebecca Parker was already shooting, taking pictures with her phone from every angle for what would be high-end social media material. Victoria pointed to the grand piano, its black top mirroring the splendor of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this instrument cost more than the average person makes in 5 years. To enjoy it, one must breed, train, and cultivate it. She left the words hanging, her eyes shifting sharply from Daniel's work boots to his plain clothing. However, Victoria declared, "I'm feeling generous tonight," her voice fading to a whisper of conspiracy that somehow permeated the entire ballroom. "Since this is a charity function, I'll make a proposal to our pal." Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his hands stayed firm at his sides. Victoria gestured to the sheet music and said, "I'll marry this guy right here, right now. If he can even play the opening measures of that Chopin piece." Delighted laughter erupted around the ballroom. "You're savage, Victoria," someone yelled. "Poor guy doesn't know what he's in for," said another voice. Victoria took out a tiny velvet box that held her 10-carat engagement ring from her purse. She set it on the music stand of the piano with dramatic accuracy. She said, "Darling, there's your engagement ring. You only need to earn it." The audience moved in close. Around the piano in a semicircle, telephones rose higher. A live feed was launched. Sterling Gala drama was already becoming popular as a hashtag. "Naturally," Victoria went on, her tone brimming with phony tenderness, "I hope you'll realize that some places aren't designed for people like you when you eventually fail." Dr. Whitman laughed uneasily. "Maybe Victoria." Victoria cut in. "But this is educational. The distinction between aspiration and aptitude, between dreaming and accomplishing, will be illustrated shortly." Her smile could have frozen champagne as she turned to Daniel. "Unless, of course, you just want to go back to your rightful responsibilities." Like smoke from a pricey cigar, the challenge hovered in the air. Daniel sensed the eagerness of the audience, their desire to amuse themselves at his cost. All of his facial expressions were captured on phones. Viral potential was already being calculated by social media algorithms. As Daniel stood there in front of Manhattan's elite, waiting for his humiliation, he heard his grandfather's voice echoing back to him. "Son, they can't take your dignity away from you. You can either carry it or you don't." Predatory satisfaction flashed in Victoria's ice-blue eyes. She had set up the ideal trap. She could either take the challenge and fail in front of the public, or she could decline and validate all the stereotypes she had just stated. "All right," she said, carefully fixing her diamond jewelry. "Does our janitor know his position, or do we have a groom?" The entire ballroom held its breath, waiting for Daniel Hayes to decide between destruction and invisibility. The piano waited as well, its keys gleaming like a perfect smile in the ballroom light. In winter, time flew by like honey. Daniel was surrounded by 200 predatory eyes, with each phone camera acting as a small eye that captured his humiliation on video for all time. He felt as though the marble floor of the ballroom was tilting under his feet, threatening to send him tumbling in the direction of either ruin or dignity. The light from the chandelier fell on Victoria Sterling's engagement ring. At least that's what everyone expected him to believe. 10 carats of derision over sheet music that may as well have been written in hieroglyphics. Victoria checked her diamond Cartier watch while singing gently, "Tick-tock, sweetheart, don't keep your bride waiting." Daniel heard Senator Morrison's wife whispering loudly, "Most likely, the poor man is incapable of reading music. This is terrible to watch." Another voice, "Calculations, viral embarrassment, losing his job, medical bills for his family, Maya's Columbia deadline, and his mother's operation were all on Daniel's thoughts. The scholarship that may ruin what little they had left or transform everything." But then, from a memory 20 years old, his grandfather's voice broke through the din of terror and consequence. "Danny, they have the power to steal your dreams, your money, and your work. However, they are unable to take away what God has placed in your heart and fingers." Music was an unaffordable luxury for his grandpa, who had performed piano in Harlem jazz clubs prior to Jim Crow laws. He taught Daniel scales by lamplight while working as a construction worker throughout the day. He had passed away with the hope that his grandson would create important music in the future. Instinctively, Daniel's hand went to his wrist, where his grandfather's gold watch lay under his uniform cuff. The warmth of the metal against his flesh served as a reminder of the promises made and the possibilities that lay ahead. He pictured Maya, bright and driven, completing her Columbia application with a single track. As his mother's strength was gradually taken away by dialysis, he thought of her with dignity. "Take care of them," he recalled his father's final words. Paying expenses was only one aspect of taking care. It meant demonstrating to them that giving up was not inherited, that losing was not the same as being underestimated. Daniel lifted his head and looked directly into Victoria's icy blue eyes. He let his entire height show for the first time since he was a child. He squared his shoulders and straightened his spine into what his music masters had described as a regal pose. Slowly, methodically, he took off his labor gloves, exposing hands that were adorned with the graceful length of craft and the calluses of survival. The light fell on his grandfather's watch, gold shining on dark skin like a manifestation of defiance. Daniel responded, "I accept your proposal, Ms." Sterling, with a new authority in his voice that appeared to change the acoustic equilibrium of the ballroom, "but I expect you to honor it when I'm finished." Something unexpected in his tone caused the throng to stir. Victoria's brows went up a little. This was hardly the defensive reaction she had planned. Daniel started to approach the piano, each stride timed to the beginning notes of a symphony that would soon alter the course of history. Like a man making his way to his own resurrection, Daniel walked up to the Steinway grand piano. The ballroom fell silent, not the courteous silence of expectation, but the complete silence that comes before either success or failure. With their phones ready to record what they believed would be a spectacular disaster, 200 of Manhattan's most influential people held their breath together. Like a prosecutor presenting evidence, Victoria Sterling stood next to the piano. Pointing to the sheet music with her diamond bracelet gleaming, the Ballade No, by Chopin. 1. She told the audience, "Even skilled pianists find it difficult to handle the intricacy of this piece, which is among the most technically challenging in the classical repertoire." Daniel saw the predatory satisfaction in her ice-blue eyes. "But do your best, please." The audience gathered around the Steinway, creating an amphitheater of anticipation. Rebecca Parker changed the position of her phone to record Victoria's jubilant response, as well as Daniel's impending failure. "This is going to hurt to watch," muttered someone in the back. "I can't take my eyes off you," said another voice. Daniel's work boots were silent on the Persian rug as he arrived at the piano bench. He just remained there for a moment, admiring the instrument's greatness. The Steinway served as a tribute to human artistry. Its ebony surface reflects the crystal chandeliers in the ballroom like black water under the stars, a $180,000 feat of precision engineering. Playing an instrument like this was his ambition. He had pictured what it would be like to have 88 flawless keys that would answer to his touch with concert hall accuracy during those late-night sessions at Lincoln Center, where he was crouched over a battered upright piano with 3 broken keys and a stuck sustained pedal. He was going to find out now, in front of those who were counting on him to fail. Daniel sat on the bench, making height adjustments with motions so honed they appeared natural. His hands lingered over the keys, sensing the energy of the instrument as if it were forging heat. Phones rose higher, the crowd surged closer, and social media algorithms assessed the possibility of a viral post. "This should work out well," someone muttered. A second voice whispered, "How long before he gives up?" Senator Morrison whispered to his wife. $10, says he doesn't make it past the first page." "Doctor, I'll take that wager. Whitman's response was unexpected due of his position. Victoria grinned broadly. She had expertly planned this humiliation, the public challenge, the impossible peace, the failure guarantee that would solidify her dominance and offer Manhattan's elite first-rate entertainment. With 50,000 mentions, the hashtag "a sterling gala drama" was already trending. Daniel gently flexed his fingers, displaying the graceful length of digits developed through years of focused effort. The innate elegance of hands that were destined to create music was not concealed by the calluses from cleaning agents. The light fell on his grandfather's gold watch, a symbol of promise and lineage. He felt the piano's response as he pressed a few keys silently to test its operation. The Steinway's touch was so powerful that it could fill music halls, and was so sensitive that it could react to even the smallest dynamic change. When Daniel's eyelids opened after a moment of closure, a profound change had occurred. The janitor had left, and an artist had taken his place. Taking a breath that seemed to pull silence from the air itself, he closed his eyes. The first time his fingers touched the keys, the touch was so light that it hardly made a sound. A faint melody that somehow demanded complete focus. Chopin's ballad No Tortillas No One opens. With the precision and clarity of a single note, placed with the assurance of a master and the delicacy of a surgeon, one appeared like dawn breaking over quiet water. Soft bass notes from Daniel's left hand seemed to tremble in unison with the marble floors of the ballroom. The smirks in the crowd subsided. Victoria's eyebrows barely registered a furrow. She hadn't anticipated this tentative fumbling. The notes were clear, well-organized and technically accurate, but when the piece got more difficult, he would undoubtedly falter. Daniel's stance was entirely different by measure 8. 10,000 hours of work had gained his shoulders muscle memory. He had the smooth ease of a director, directing an unseen orchestra as his wrists drifted over the keys. An artist who filled the large ballroom like incense had taken the place of the bashful janitor. Halfway to his lips, "Doctor." Whitman's champagne glass paused. "That's really pretty advanced," he whispered to his friend. The crowd's European elite started to listen intently, with the look of a man who has recognized something priceless. Count Alessandro Di Marco, who possessed a collection of rare Stradivarius instruments, leaned forward and whispered to his wife, "The touch. Hear that touch." The melody began to truly blossom around measure 16. A dialogue between voices that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than the piano strings was created when Daniel's right hand moved across the higher registers while his left kept the rhythmic foundation. The music was being created, not performed. Steinway's voice came through in his touch in ways that the instrument hardly ever did. Every key gave a crystal-clear response. Subtle dynamics that would have been unachievable on lesser instruments are made feasible by the concert grand's excellent acoustics. Daniel created legato lines that sailed through the air like silk ribbons, shaping phrases with breathing that seemed to prolong the piano's inherent decay. The crowd started to unconsciously change. Now, bodies that had been set up for derision leaned forward with real curiosity. Mid-whisper, conversations ended. When Rebecca Parker realized her live stream was catching something special, she even stopped commenting on social media. There were so many messages on the comment feed. "Whoa, is this thing for real? Who is this man? This is just amazing." Senator Morrison completely put his phone down. "David, he's really good," his wife whispered as she took hold of his arm. The change to the B section came like a velvet-wrapped thunderclap. Daniel's skill burst into view. With chromatic lines so quick they blended into pure emotion, arpeggios that poured down the keyboard like water over stones, and octaves that echoed like church bells. His face mirrored the emotional terrain of the music, appearing furious during dramatic climaxes and vulnerable during lyrical moments, while his hands moved with surgeon-like precision. Someone said, "Jesus Christ." In reality, he plays the piano. "Shh," was the scathing response. The audience was no longer seeing a humiliation. For the most part, they had never seen such art outside of Lincoln Center. As Daniel made his way through sections that conservatory graduates would find difficult, Victoria's ice-blue eyes grew wide. While his right hand produced runs that appeared to transcend the physical constraints of 10 fingers, his left hand thundered over bass octaves. The song reverberated with cathedral-like majesty off the crystal fixtures and marble walls. Filling the entire ballroom, a young CEO in the pharmaceutical industry took out his phone and looked up the piece's level of difficulty on Google. One of the hardest pieces in the piano repertory. His face became white as he read it. Demands sophisticated musicianship and high technical proficiency. It's frequently employed as a standard for pianists at the professional level. The audience started muttering in awe. Tech giants who invested in uncommon instruments saw that they were seeing something that was beyond their means. Pharmaceutical researchers saw similar complexity being achieved with perfect precision because they understood the complicated molecular structures. Like a professional chef using a knife to make deadly methods appear effortless through years of practice, Daniel skillfully handled Chopin's most perilous moments. With every melody lingering in the air like priceless perfume, his pedaling produced layers of resonance that turned the ballroom into a symphony hall. Despite his circumstances, the development section shone interpretive maturity. Daniel experimented with tempo and dynamics that only artists who are confident in their abilities try, slowing down impossible stretches to evoke the strongest emotional response and then speeding up with technical fireworks that conservatory students would find difficult to grasp. With tears in his eyes, Count DeMarco turned to face his wife. "This is what we heard in 1987 at La Scala Maria. This is the artistry level." Victoria clutched her diamond bracelet, her hands shaking a little. This was not feasible. This is not how janitors played Chopin. Men from the working class lacked this degree of cultural sophistication. With every well-crafted sentence, everything she held to be true about social hierarchy, education, and breeding was falling apart. The music intensified before making a dramatic comeback. Now, Daniel's whole body was moving in time with Chopin's melodies. Like a professional organist, his feet worked the pedals. Melodic lines swayed his shoulders. His breathing even matched the lyrics in the song. He wasn't merely a pianist. Chopin's genius has found its way into the contemporary world through him. Rebecca Parker's hands shook as she held her phone. In real time, 100,000 people had watched her live stream. More comments came in than she could read. "I have never heard anything so beautiful. Who is this man? I'm crying right now. This has to go viral immediately." Every subtlety of Daniel's performance was transported to the farthest reaches of the ballroom by the acoustics. Despite never having seen a classical symphony, pharmaceutical executives were driven to tears by music they couldn't identify, but nonetheless understood. Tech titans who used algorithms to gauge performance found that some things could only be felt, not measured. Even expert pianists held their breath during the cadenza, the piece's most technically challenging section, with the left hand retaining bass octaves and the right hand exploding into cascading runs that seemed to defy physical reality. Daniel's hands split into separate voices. Everyone in the ballroom held their breath. As Daniel performed pieces that her own childhood piano teacher had declared unattainable for anybody other than the most talented musicians, Victoria's mouth dropped wide. Every note sounded true and clear, yet his fingers moved so fast that they blurred. His touch caused the Steinway to sing like a possessed instrument, its voice rising above the startled quiet of Manhattan's elite. When he saw it, Count DeMarco's years of musical training recognized mastery, and he stood up without thinking. Unable to stay sitting in the face of such skill, other audience members did the same. Before the last part, Daniel halted for precisely one heartbeat, a pristine silence that seemed to last forever. During that interval, 200 people were aware that something remarkable was happening. Previously used for jeering, phones now recorded with awe. Then Daniel's hands came down like lightning under control. The crystal chandeliers appeared to tremble as the last measures burst into force. Melody lines soared toward the vaulted ceiling as bass notes thundered through the ballroom's foundation. In addition to being perfect, Daniel's technique was sublime. He wasn't merely carrying out Chopin's instructions. He was channeling generations of forebears whose skills had been buried beneath survival, 7 years of unfulfilled goals, and a lifetime of being invisible. Every presumption the audience had brought into the room was challenged by the final chord, which sounded like a declaration of war. As the ballroom processed what had just happened, Daniel kept the sustain pedal depressed and let the harmonies to develop organically. There was silence, complete, total silence, for 4.3 seconds, long enough for reality to reorganize itself around a new reality. Count Alessandro Di Marco started the eruption and standing ovation. Like a man seeing the second coming, the Italian aristocrat whose family had supported artists for 5 centuries got up from his chair. Thunderous applause erupted from his aged hands, which had cheered Horowitz at Carnegie Hall and Pavarotti at La Scala. "Bravo!" he yelled, his voice breaking with passion. "Magnifico! Completely amazing!" The cheers went around like wildfire. Forgetting the champagne, Dr. Whitman jumped to his feet. A Hermes scarf, worth more than most monthly salaries, was used by Senator Morrison's wife to dab at her eyes. Tech executives were moved by something that was intangible, even though they measured everything in data points. "Amazing!" Dr. Whitman exclaimed. "Just amazing!" As Rebecca Parker attempted to record the change taking place in the ballroom, her phone trembled in her hands. 250,000 people had watched her live stream. The feed was inundated with comments more quickly than she could comprehend. "I'm crying right now. What a genius this man is. Victoria Sterling was recently taken. This king is who?" Pushing through the crowd toward the piano was the director of Lincoln Center, who had been there as Victoria's guest. His demeanor was that of a man who has just unearthed hidden treasure. "I don't know who you are, but you belong on the greatest stages in the world, not cleaning them," he yelled, his voice echoing over the ballroom as everyone stopped talking to listen. A murmur of agreement went across the crowd as classical music fans and talent scouts realized what they had seen. Business cards started to appear from tuxedo pockets. "Give this man a recording contract," someone yelled. "Carnegie Hall. He must be at Carnegie Hall," said another voice. Victoria Sterling remained motionless next to the piano the entire time, resembling a statue made of shame and ice. Disbelief turned to humiliation, which then solidified into calculation, followed by a range of emotions on her face. The most spectacular casualty of this evening's entertainment had been the woman who had planned it. Seeking a way out of her own viral catastrophe, her icy blue eyes darted around the dance floor. She had lost her entourage. James Morrison was already planning damage control measures as he was occupied with capturing the ovation on his phone. The standing ovation had included Dr. Whitman. Even her own publicist, Rebecca Parker, was more concerned about gauging the crowd's response than preserving her employer's reputation. Victoria's hands shook a little, and the light hit her diamond jewelry. A testament to her error, the 10-diamond engagement ring was still resting on the piano's music stand. Her own astounding miscalculation had resulted in what had been meant as props for Daniel's humiliation. While channeling Chopin's masterwork, Daniel stayed sitting at the piano bench, his chest rising and falling with the effort. Although he was sweating profusely, he felt the silent satisfaction of a man who had just demonstrated that greatness knows no bounds. Slowly, he stood up, his work attire somehow becoming the triumphant costume. As he stood up, 200 pairs of hands applauding not only his performance but also his very existence, the cheers grew louder. Daniel Hayes had been out of sight for 7 years. He now demanded all of its focus. His brown eyes met Victoria's ice-blue ones with a steady confidence as he turned to face her directly. An artist who understood his value had taken the place of the janitor who had shuddered under her derision. Despite the continuous cheers, Daniel's voice could be heard clearly throughout the ballroom as he said, "Miss Sterling, I think you need to organize a wedding." With a precise and graceful motion, he pointed to the engagement ring resting on the music stand. "Do I need to clear my calendar?" There was fresh applause and joyous laughter across the hall. Someone gave a grateful whistle. "She walked right into that one," yelled another voice. Under her flawlessly placed makeup, Victoria's face turned red. The dignity of a janitor silenced a billionaire, causing her mouth to open and close silently. Someone she had thought was beneath her notice had just outmaneuvered the lady who had created an empire on strategic cruelty. Daniel put his work gloves next to the piano bench and reached for them. He placed them carefully next to Victoria's engagement ring, creating a striking contrast between pampered luxury and calloused protection. "It was all mine," he remarked quietly. The balance of power that had characterized the evening's outset had been totally flipped. After 35 years of commanding every room she entered, Victoria Sterling now stood on the periphery of her own event. A man she had attempted to destroy was suddenly highlighted by the spotlight that had been hers by birthright. As Manhattan's elite celebrated the victory of skill over prejudice, dignity over brutality, and content over surface, the applause persisted, becoming louder rather than weaker. All the phones in the room had filmed Victoria's well-planned humiliation for future generations, and it had turned into Daniel's coronation. There was no pause in the applause. If anything, it grew more intense as the entire impact of what had happened became ingrained in the minds of Manhattan's elite. Daniel Hayes was more than just a pianist. He had broken stereotypes, changed stories, and turned a ballroom into a cathedral of human worth. With the enthusiasm of a man who had just witnessed the history of art, Count DiMarco pushed his way through the crowd. "Maestro," he replied, taking both of Daniel's hands in his, "I have been going to concerts for 60 years, and I have hardly ever heard Chopin played with such spirit. I need to know where you studied." Before Daniel could respond, the director of Lincoln Center was before him, holding out a business card. "We must speak, right now. Artistic Director Thomas Berkowitz. I'm considering a debut recital, recording options, and residency. It is impossible to conceal this degree of craftsmanship." There were business cards everywhere. Recording executives, talent scouts, and fans of classical music all realized the same thing that had just hit them in the face. While they drank champagne and spoke about investment portfolios, excellence had been cleaning their floors. A woman in a fine suit was pushed through the mob, according to Deutsche Grammophon. "We have to talk about recording contracts tonight." A&R director Astrid Mueller. A digital earthquake had centered on Rebecca Parker's phone. With 500,000 continuous watchers, her live stream is still growing. The Sterling Gala drama was completely overshadowed by the global trending hashtag #JanitorGenius. The platform couldn't keep up with the volume of comments. "This man is deserving of everything. Victoria Sterling has just made history. I'm crying uncontrollably." There is no address for talent. The most significant acknowledgement, however, came from a surprising place. At the service entrance to the ballroom, Marcus Williams, the Lincoln Center security officer who had opened Practice Room C for Daniel's midnight sessions, showed up. Rebecca's live stream showed up on his phone while he was working double shift. Tears were running down his grizzled face as he stood in the doorway. "Danny!" he yelled, his voice full of passion. "Those hands weren't designed for mopping, I told you." As Marcus went up to his companion, the audience turned to face the service entrance. In a world that had attempted to make them invisible, the two men embraced each other as brothers, teacher and student, janitor and security guard. Daniel put his arm around the elder man's shoulders and said to the audience, "Marcus got me those practice sessions. Tonight would never happen without him." The cheers turned back to Marcus, who had become an unintentional hero in the story of the evening. The moment was caught by phones, which turned a straightforward embrace into a representation of guidance and opportunity. Victoria Sterling's world collapsed in front of her as she watched from next to the piano. As traders digested the viral catastrophe, the stock price of her pharmaceutical enterprise was already declining. Members of the board were texting damage control plans in a panic. Her phone was constantly buzzing with calls from crisis management companies. However, the repercussions were only getting started. A piercing voice from the crowd said, "Miss Sterling," with the grin of a shark sniffing blood. Harrison Cross, CEO of Meridian Therapeutics, Victoria's main business opponent, came out. "An interesting evening. In your honor, I'm creating a $50 million scholarship fund for underutilized talent. The Sterling Second Chances Foundation is what we'll call it." This statement was met with especially enthusiastic applause from the crowd. When Victoria saw that her act of cruelty was being turned into her rival's generosity, her face turned pale. Not to be outdone, computer tycoon Jennifer Park declared she had $100 million. Working-class artists are eligible for full-riding scholarships, as it is evident that we have been searching in the wrong locations for talent. As Manhattan's elite sought to disassociate themselves from Victoria's humiliation while identifying with Daniel's victory, the bidding war of generous one-upmanship persisted. Inspired by seeing a janitor play the piano, more than $300 million in arts funding and scholarships were pledged in a matter of minutes. After ringing sporadically, Daniel's phone suddenly exploded with notifications. He had been recognized on social media. Within 10 minutes, his Facebook page had 50,000 followers. A spectator of the live feed started a GoFundMe for his mother's surgery, and it has already raised $100,000. Still wearing her Columbia University sweatshirt, Danny Meyer's voice broke through the commotion of the ballroom as she rushed through the main door. When she saw her brother trending on Twitter, she had run out of the metro. "What on earth is going on? You are literally everywhere." As Meyer hurried to her brother, her eyes wide with shock, the crowd dispersed. Mom murmured that she was watching from the hospital on Facebook Live. "She's in tears. Enjoy your tears. The procedure has already been discussed over the phone. It was paid for by someone. The entire sum was wired by an unidentified contributor." Daniel eventually lost his cool. 7 years of bearing the burden of his family, 7 years of unseen hardship, and 7 years of unfulfilled hopes. This realization, which felt like resurrection, was the culmination of it all. The director of Lincoln Center reappeared at Daniel's shoulder. "I would like to offer you the position of principal pianist, Mr. Hayes, with immediate effect. Creative freedom, housing allowance, and full benefits. Are you going to agree?" Daniel surveyed the ballroom where he had gone from being unnoticeable to being remembered. Victoria Sterling, a billionaire made inconsequential by her own brutality, stood by herself next to her piano. With the eagerness of those who had just witnessed history, the gathering awaited his answer. Daniel murmured softly, I'll finish my shift first. However, I do accept. The ensuing cheers appeared to rock the core of Manhattan's beliefs about talent, value, and the perilous presumptions that privilege makes about what is possible. 3 months later, Daniel Hayes, dressed in a finely fitted tuxedo, took the stage at Carnegie Hall. As he walked up to the Steinway grand piano, which was waiting like an old friend, his grandfather's gold watch was the center of attention. Tech giants, pharmaceutical executives, and European nobles who had seen his metamorphosis at the Meridian Club were among the sold-out crowd. They were no longer observing a janitor play the piano, though they were seeing the newest classical sensation in America make its debut. His mother was seated in the front row, looking lovely and in good health following her successful surgery. And now Maya, who has a full scholarship that came about as a result of Daniel's viral moment, is doing well in her first semester at Columbia. Marcus Williams was in a position of honor, wearing a suit that had been bought especially for the event in place of his security guard uniform. Notably missing was Victoria Sterling. The public scrutiny that followed her #JanitorGenius caused her pharmaceutical empire to collapse. A CEO who truly saw the distinction between profit and humanity had taken her position on the board, a testament to the peril of underestimating people. She had withdrew to her Hampton mansion, where her Steinway grand piano sat uncovered and covered. Chopin's ballad No One was played while Daniel's fingertips pressed the keys for his opening selection. Naturally, he first considered the path from invisibility to this point. This was the result of every midnight practice session. He had been ready to be seen, every moment of being ignored. Not only was the resulting song technically flawless, it was prayer turned into sound, dignity turned into sound, and evidence that greatness may exist without permission. Daniel stood to receive an ovation that seemed to go on forever as the last notes faded into reverent quiet. He wasn't thinking about the applause, though. Decades ago, his grandfather had whispered a lesson about it. They have the power to steal your dreams, your money, and your work. What God puts in your soul, however, they cannot take away. 2,800 folks felt that truth tonight. There are no uniforms for talent. Designer labels are not used to advertise genius. It is possible that everyone with a mop bucket is also carrying Mozart in their heart. Beethoven might be hiding among all the security personnel. In quiet, each cashier may write symphonies. Our society evaluates value based on bank statements, potential based on postal codes, and worth based on job titles. However, opportunity is still illegally hoarded, while brilliance is distributed democratically. Every day, how many Daniels walk by you? How many times have others discounted, ignored, or underestimated you because of your actions rather than your character? More significantly, how many times have you been Victoria, who missed genius because it wasn't encased in luxury, made assumptions based on appearances, or judged books by their covers? There is excellence everywhere. Whether it exists is not the question. It's whether we're paying attention.